The morning sun painted golden streaks across the marble floors of Valdoria Palace as 8-year-old Prince Alexander walked quietly through the grand corridors. His small footsteps echoed softly against the high ceilings, but today something felt different in the palace. The usual cheerful chatter among the staff seemed muted, and even the royal guards who typically nodded warmly at the young prince appeared lost in thought. Prince Alexander had always been an observant child. While his older sister, Princess Isabella, preferred grand gestures and elaborate ceremonies, Alexander found joy in the simple moments. He noticed when Cook Margaret smiled a little less brightly, when head butler Thomas walked with slower steps, and when the gardeners spent extra time tending to his mother's favorite roses. Today, as he made his way to the breakfast room, Alexander noticed something particularly troubling. Guard Captain William Morrison, who had protected the royal family for over 20 years, stood at his usual post near the main entrance. But instead of his typically straight shoulders and alert expression, Captain Morrison's eyes seemed distant and heavy with worry. Alexander had known Captain Morrison his entire life. The seasoned guard had taught him how to tie proper knots, showed him the secret passages within the palace walls, and always carried an extra piece of chocolate in his uniform pocket for the young prince. More importantly, Captain Morrison had been like a grandfather to Alexander, filling a role left empty when the prince's own grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier. As breakfast concluded, Alexander overheard whispered conversations between his parents, King Edmund and Queen Victoria. The words were spoken in hushed tones, but Alexander's young ears caught fragments that made his heart sink. Financial troubles, medical bills, and most heartbreaking of all, Captain Morrison's daughter Sarah was seriously ill and needed expensive treatment that the captain's salary couldn't cover. Captain Morrison had served the royal family with unwavering loyalty, working extra shifts, missing holidays, and dedicating his life to protecting those he cared about. Now, when his own family needed protection from circumstances beyond his control, the proud man was struggling in silence, too honorable to ask for help and too devoted to his duty to let his personal troubles affect his work. Throughout the morning lessons with his private tutor, Alexander found his attention wandering. Master Thompson, his elderly instructor, noticed the prince's distraction, but assumed it was typical childhood restlessness. However, Alexander's mind was working on something far more complex than arithmetic or geography. He was thinking about loyalty, kindness, and what it truly meant to be royal. During lunch, Alexander watched as Captain Morrison maintained his professional demeanor despite the weight clearly pressing on his shoulders. The captain's wife, Mary, worked in the palace kitchen, and Alexander had seen her wiping away tears when she thought no one was looking. Their daughter Sarah was only 6 years old, younger than Alexander himself, and the thought of her suffering while her parents worried about money made the young prince feel a deep ache in his chest. After lunch, Alexander made a decision that would surprise everyone in the palace. Instead of heading to the royal playroom or joining his sister for afternoon tea, he walked purposefully to his private chambers. There, hidden beneath his bed in a small wooden box his grandfather had given him, lay Alexander's most precious possession. The box contained Alexander's entire collection of gold coins, silver pieces, and precious gems that he had received as gifts over the years. Birthday presents from foreign dignitaries, coins from distant kingdoms visited during royal tours, and rare jewels given to him by admiring subjects. To most adults, these might have seemed like mere trinkets, but to Alexander they represented every special moment and memory of his young life. Each piece told a story. The golden coin with the dragon emblem came from the kingdom of Etheria, given to him by their young king during a diplomatic visit. The silver piece with intricate carvings was a gift from the mountain tribes of Nordheim, presented to him during his first royal tour at age 6. The small sapphire had been his great-aunt's gift, passed down through generations of the royal family. As Alexander held each piece, memories flooded back. But stronger than his attachment to these treasures was the image of Captain Morrison's worried face and the thought of little Sarah needing help. The prince had heard his parents discuss the importance of duty, compassion, and using one's position to help others. Today, Alexander understood what those words truly meant. He carefully counted every piece in his collection. The total value was substantial, certainly enough to cover Sarah's medical treatment and provide the Morrison family with financial security for years to come. Most children would have hesitated, perhaps asked their parents for permission, or looked for a less personal way to help. But Alexander knew that sometimes the most meaningful gifts require the greatest sacrifice. The young prince sat quietly in his room as afternoon shadows grew longer across the palace grounds. Through his window, he could see Captain Morrison standing guard at his post, shoulders still tense with worry. In a few hours, the captain would return home to his small house just outside the palace grounds, where his wife Mary would greet him with a brave smile that couldn't quite hide her fear, and where little Sarah would be waiting with hopeful eyes for news about her treatment. Alexander made his final decision as the palace bells chimed 4 o'clock. He would not simply give the money to Captain Morrison directly, as that might wound the proud man's dignity. Instead, the prince would find a way to make this gift feel like something earned rather than charity. After all, Captain Morrison had earned it through years of faithful service and kindness. The young prince carefully placed all his treasures back in the wooden box, his small hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. Soon, the entire palace would witness an act of quiet generosity that would touch every heart within these ancient walls and create a story that would be whispered with wonder for generations to come. As the evening approached, Prince Alexander put his plan into motion with the careful thought of someone far beyond his 8 years. He had spent hours considering how to help Captain Morrison while preserving the man's dignity and pride. The solution came to him during his evening prayers, inspired by stories his grandmother had told him about anonymous benefactors who helped others in secret. Alexander waited until the palace settled into its evening rhythm. The day guards were preparing to hand over their duties to the night shift, and most of the palace staff were busy with dinner preparations. This was the perfect time for the young prince to move without drawing attention to his unusual activities. First, Alexander sought out Master Thompson, his elderly tutor, who had served the palace for over 40 years. The wise old man was in the library, organizing the next day's lessons. Alexander approached him with unusual formality, requesting a private audience. Master Thompson, surprised by the prince's serious demeanor, agreed immediately. "Master Thompson," Alexander began, his young voice steady with determination, "I need your help with something very important. Captain Morrison has served our family with honor for 20 years, and I believe he deserves special recognition for his service." Alexander explained his idea carefully. He wanted to create an official ceremony to honor Captain Morrison's service, but with a unique twist. Instead of a typical royal commendation, Alexander proposed awarding the captain a service legacy fund, a monetary reward that would appear to be an official palace tradition for long-serving staff members. Master Thompson's eyes widened as he realized the depth of the young prince's plan. Alexander wasn't just giving away his treasures. He was creating an entire framework that would allow Captain Morrison to receive help while maintaining his dignity. The tutor agreed to help draft the official documents that would make this appear to be a legitimate palace tradition. Together, they worked late into the evening, crafting a beautiful certificate that declared Captain Morrison the first recipient of the Royal Service Legacy Award. The document stated that this honor was bestowed upon staff members who had demonstrated exceptional loyalty and dedication for 20 years or more. Master Thompson used his finest calligraphy to make the certificate appear ancient and official. Meanwhile, Alexander carefully arranged his precious collection in an elegant wooden chest that had belonged to his grandfather. He wrote a simple note explaining that the contents represented the monetary portion of the Legacy Award, calculated based on the captain's years of service and dedication to the royal family. The next morning, Alexander approached his parents with his completed plan. King Edmund and Queen Victoria listened in amazement as their youngest child explained his entire scheme with remarkable maturity. Alexander had even thought to calculate how this tradition could continue in the future, ensuring that other loyal staff members might benefit as well. Queen Victoria felt tears gathering in her eyes as she realized that her son had given away everything he treasured to help someone he cared about. King Edmund felt a surge of pride that almost overwhelmed him, recognizing that Alexander had grasped the true meaning of leadership and service in a way that many adults never understand. Without hesitation, the royal couple agreed to make Alexander's fictional tradition into a real palace policy. They would contribute their own funds to ensure that the Legacy Award could continue annually, and they would present Alexander's gift to Captain Morrison as if it truly were an official royal honor. The ceremony was arranged for that very afternoon in the palace's formal reception hall. Word spread quickly through the palace staff about the special recognition ceremony, though none of them knew the true story behind it. Captain Morrison was informed that his presence was required for an important palace announcement, though he wasn't told the specific reason. As the appointed hour approached, Captain Morrison stood in the reception hall wearing his dress uniform, polished to perfection despite his inner turmoil about his daughter's situation. He assumed this gathering was routine, perhaps related to scheduling changes or security updates. The palace staff assembled quietly, sensing something significant was about to happen. Cook Margaret stood beside head butler Thomas, both wearing their finest uniforms. The gardeners had been given permission to attend, creating an atmosphere of anticipation throughout the room. King Edmund and Queen Victoria entered the hall with formal dignity, followed by Princess Isabella and Prince Alexander. The young prince carried a leather portfolio containing the certificate, while his father held the wooden chest containing Alexander's precious collection. "Captain Morrison," King Edmund began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "you have served this family and this kingdom with unwavering dedication for 20 years. Your loyalty, courage, and integrity have been the foundation upon which the safety of this palace rests." Captain Morrison stood straighter, though confusion flickered in his eyes. He had received commendations before, but nothing had felt quite this formal or significant. Queen Victoria stepped forward, her voice warm but official. "Today, we establish a new tradition in our palace. The Royal Service Legacy Award will be presented annually to staff members who embody the highest ideals of service and dedication." Prince Alexander watched Captain Morrison's face carefully, seeing the moment when understanding began to dawn. The captain's eyes widened slightly as King Edmund opened the wooden chest, revealing the glittering collection of coins and gems within. "Captain Morrison," the king continued, "you are the first recipient of this honor. This award includes both recognition of your service and a monetary gift calculated to reflect the value of your dedication to our family." As Master Thompson read the beautiful certificate aloud, highlighting Captain Morrison's 20 years of faithful service, the captain's military composure began to crack slightly. His eyes moved from the certificate to the chest of treasures, then to the royal family standing before him. When Captain Morrison's gaze met Prince Alexander's innocent smile, something clicked in the experienced guard's mind. He had seen that particular collection of treasures before, admired in the prince's room during their friendly visits. The captain realized, with a combination of amazement and deep emotion, exactly what had happened. The room fell silent as Captain Morrison struggled to maintain his professional demeanor while processing the extraordinary generosity he was witnessing. Every person in the hall could see that this was no ordinary ceremony, and that something truly special was unfolding before their eyes. The silence in the reception hall stretched for several heartbeats as Captain Morrison struggled to find words. His weathered hands, steady enough to protect royalty for 2 decades, trembled slightly as he looked from the precious treasures to the young prince who had sacrificed everything for his family's welfare. "Your Majesty," Captain Morrison began, his voice thick with emotion, I cannot possibly accept such generosity." But even as he spoke, the captain's eyes revealed the internal battle between his pride and his desperate need to help his daughter Sarah. Prince Alexander stepped forward, his small hand reaching out to gently touch the captain's arm. "Captain Morrison," the prince said in his clear, young voice, "you taught me that true honor comes from serving others without expecting anything in return. You've done that for my family every day for 20 years. Please let us serve you now." The simple wisdom in those words, spoken by a child who had given up his most treasured possessions, broke through Captain Morrison's defenses completely. The decorated guard, who had faced armed threats and dangerous situations without flinching, felt tears building in his eyes. Around the room, the palace staff watched in stunned silence as they witnessed something unprecedented. Cook Margaret pressed a handkerchief to her eyes, remembering all the times Prince Alexander had visited her kitchen with genuine interest in the staff's well-being. Head butler Thomas stood straighter, realizing that this young prince understood service and leadership better than many adults twice his age. But the most remarkable moment came when Captain Morrison slowly removed his ceremonial guard's helmet and, in a gesture that sent ripples of amazement through the assembled staff, knelt on one knee before the 8-year-old prince. "Your Royal Highness," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "in 20 years of service, I have protected your family with my sword and my shield, but today you have protected my family with your heart. I pledge that every day for the rest of my service will be dedicated not just to your safety, but to becoming worthy of the extraordinary kindness you have shown." The sight of the veteran captain kneeling before Prince Alexander created a moment of such profound respect that several of the other guards present followed suit. First, the guard stationed at the door stepped forward and knelt. Then another guard joined him. Within moments, every security officer in the room had abandoned their posts to honor the young prince whose quiet act had touched all their hearts. King Edmund felt his throat tighten as he watched his youngest son handle this moment with remarkable grace. Alexander gently placed his hand on Captain Morrison's shoulder and said, "Please stand, Captain. You don't kneel to me. We serve each other." Queen Victoria wiped away tears as she realized that her son had just demonstrated the highest ideals of leadership without any formal training in diplomacy or governance. He had simply acted from pure compassion and wisdom beyond his years. The ceremony concluded with Captain Morrison officially accepting the award, his voice strong despite the emotion in his eyes. As the staff began to disperse, word of what had truly happened spread through the palace like wildfire. By evening, every person working within those ancient walls knew that Prince Alexander had given away his entire treasure collection to help one of their own. The response from the palace community was immediate and overwhelming. Cook Margaret prepared Captain Morrison's favorite meal and had it sent to his family home. The gardeners picked the most beautiful flowers from the royal gardens to create a bouquet for little Sarah. Head butler Thomas discreetly arranged for the palace's physician to visit the Morrison house to ensure Sarah received the best possible care. But perhaps the most touching response came from Princess Isabella, Alexander's older sister. That evening, she approached her younger brother in his chambers, where he sat reading quietly as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Alexander," she said, sitting beside him, "what you did today was the most royal thing I've ever seen." She paused, then added, "I want to help Captain Morrison's family too. Will you teach me how to do something that meaningful?" Prince Alexander smiled at his sister, his young face showing no regret for his sacrifice. "It's not about the money, Isabella. It's about seeing when someone needs help and finding a way to give it without making them feel small." Over the following weeks, the impact of Alexander's quiet act rippled through the palace and beyond. Captain Morrison's daughter, Sarah, received the treatment she needed and made a full recovery. The captain himself seemed to stand taller and smile more freely. The burden of worry lifted from his shoulders. More importantly, the Royal Service Legacy Award that Alexander had invented became a genuine tradition. Each year, King Edmund and Queen Victoria would select a staff member for special recognition, ensuring that loyalty and dedication were properly honored. The award had grown beyond Alexander's initial gift, funded by the royal treasury, but its spirit remained true to the young prince's original vision. The palace guards developed a new tradition as well. Whenever Prince Alexander walked through the corridors, they would nod with special respect, remembering the day an 8-year-old boy had shown them what true nobility looked like. Some of the older guards would tell new recruits the story of the prince who gave away his treasures, ensuring that the lesson would be passed down through generations. Captain Morrison kept the wooden chest containing Alexander's precious collection in a place of honor in his home, but he insisted that the coins and gems be stored safely in the palace treasury. "These treasures belong to the prince," he told King Edmund. "I was honored to receive them when my family needed help, but they should be kept for him to reclaim when he's older." However, when King Edmund presented this idea to Alexander, the prince shook his head firmly. "Captain Morrison earned those treasures through his service and kindness to me," Alexander said. "They're his now, and I hope he'll use them to help other people who need them." Years later, when Prince Alexander grew into a young man and eventually became king himself, he would often reflect on that day in the reception hall. He had learned that true power came not from commanding others, but from serving them with genuine care. The wooden box that once held his treasures became a symbol in his private chambers, reminding him daily that leadership meant giving rather than taking. The story of Prince Alexander's quiet act became legend within the kingdom of Valdoria, passed down through generations as an example of what it truly meant to be royal. And in the palace corridors, where young Alexander had once walked with his small footsteps echoing softly, future generations of royalty would learn that the greatest treasures in life are those we give away in love. Captain Morrison served the royal family for 15 more years before retiring with full honors. His daughter Sarah grew up to become a physician, inspired by her own experience to dedicate her life to helping others. And whenever she treated a patient who couldn't afford care, she would remember the young prince who had sacrificed everything for a little girl he barely knew, proving that compassion knows no boundaries of age, status, or circumstance. The palace still stands today, its marble halls echoing with the footsteps of new generations. But those who know its history say that on quiet mornings, when the sunlight streams through the windows just right, you can still feel the warmth of that moment when a child's pure heart melted an entire kingdom with a single act of selfless love.